So it's very fitting that we have Amena to host this session because we're going to start with the world's largest energy company, Saudi Aramco. So when we talk about energy security, there's few companies in the world that carry more responsibility than Aramco does. And we're very fortunate today to have with us the president and CEO of Aramco, Amin Nasser. He's guided this company through a myriad of challenges since he took over in 2015. You've probably seen his comments of late, warning, as he has for years, about the lack of upstream investments, and he's been able to bravely put that out there and make that message loud and clear. Many are, as we've discussed, are not able to say that so clearly. So Mr. Nasser is of course, our 2020 Energy Executive of the Year. As Peter mentioned, it was an honor he earned from mobilizing a swift response to the attacks on Aramco's oil facilities in 2019, which took out, and I had to go look it up again, some 60% of Saudi production offline. But Mr. Nasser's leadership returned most of that production within days, and the rest of it came within weeks, to, frankly, the astonishment of many people. I remember sitting on stage talking to Mr. Nasser in the aftermath of that, and he promised it would be back online shortly. And I'm sure everyone in the audience believed him, but he did, he delivered. So he handles his position with professionalism, with poise, and I know how respected he is by his peers. And so for that reason, we wanted to present him his 2020 award in person right now, before the first session. We, of course, celebrated him online. Thousands were watching Shell CEO Ben van Beurden hand him the award virtually, which was great, but it's just not the same as receiving a trophy in person. So before he sits down with Amena, please join me in congratulating Amin Nasser, our 2020 Energy Executive of the Year.
Thank you.
There you go. Come over here.
Thank you. There you go. Thank you.
That's Amin. Thanks.
Mr. Nasser, welcome.
Amina.
Welcome, please. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Energy Intelligence Forum. Once again, it's lovely seeing everyone in person. It's been such a long time. We're delighted to have you, Mr. Nasser, with us, and congratulations on the award.
Thank you, Amina, and allow me just to say a few words. I would like first to congratulate His Excellency Saad Al-Kaabi for the Energy Executive of the Year award, and I would like to say also a few words about Ben. Ben is, first is a good friend, and a true friend. And I think the whole industry will miss his contribution and leadership, not only Shell. He will be missed by everyone around the industry for what you have contributed. I had the pleasure to work with Ben as a partner in a number of JVs and as part of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, and as a member and as a head of the oil and gas community in WEF. And through all of that, his insight and leadership was great and contribution to the industry. And I can assure you we'll miss you a lot. You are a man of integrity, and I'm proud to say also a good friend. Thank you, and best of luck.
Thank you, Mr. Nasser. Well, Mr. Nasser, it's difficult not to start with this topic. It's the overarching theme that has occupied many people and many in my industry as well, the energy crisis. We know that Aramco, being the world's biggest oil exporter, you have a unique perspective on market and market fundamentals. Can you tell us how you see the Ukraine crisis and the current energy crisis in Europe reshaping the flows?
Definitely the crisis between Russia and Ukraine and the amount of production that Russia is contributing to the market, 8 million barrels in terms of crude and products, is significant, and it has its own impact on the global energy supply. However, I need to say that, we have seen the tightness in the market even before the crisis. When we start recovering from COVID, demand start picking up big time, and inventories start going down, and we've seen prices going up. The crisis between Russia and Ukraine only intensified what's happening. At the end of the day, I look at crude oil as, fungible commodity. It will be moved from one place to the others. I think they are going to face some insurance issues, logistical issues, but it's all manageable considering, the discounts that is being offered by Russians to different customers around the world. So if you look at it in terms of what's going to happen over the next couple of months, of course, the embargo will only happen in December.
December 5th. Yeah.
And then the products first quarter next year. And then depending on what happens and if there is further sanctions on third-party buyers of Russian crudes, we don't know. And what would that means to different supply, that will introduce new challenges. But for the time being, I look at it with the right discounts. It's a fungible commodity, will be going from one market to the other. The more issue, I think, is gas and LNG, because you need, first of all, there's no spare capacity available in the market. These are all in long-term contract. And also, you need to build LNG terminals, receiving terminals. That will take a couple of years. So it's a much bigger issue for gas and LNG than crude oil.
So, Mr. Nasser, in the short term, how do you see this impacting Aramco's operation? Are you finding that there is more demand in Europe? Are you currently selling more crude to Europe? And we've had various questions from Asian customers as well, saying if you're going to be cutting their allocations in order to divert some of the crude into Europe. So is this something that's happening?
First, to us, the Asian market is the main market in terms of its growth market for Saudi Aramco. We have a lot of our investment also in Asia, and we are going to grow the number of investment that we have in Asia. So it is a very critical and important market. We have long-term customers, great relationship, and we have long-term also contracts with these customers. So we will maintain our position, and we didn't see any impact because of the shifting of barrels from Europe to Asia, because of the relationship, because of the reliability of our supply and the long-term contracts that we have with the different customers. We also maintain a good market in Europe and in North America, and we will continue to meet the call on us to the extent possible in Europe, because they are really facing the problem right now.
And you've mentioned the discounted barrels, the Russian discounts. Is that affecting at all Aramco's operations in terms of a market share fight in Asia, which is, as you said, your major customers are there?
Not whatsoever, let me put it that way. You have, even with these discounts, as I said, we have long-term relation, long-term contracts. These markets also, we have to also understand, they don't want to create an over-dependence in one source. Mm-hmm. That is also something that people need to take into consideration. They would like to diversify their sources of supply. And for us, we didn't see any impact as a result of the shifting of barrels because of our reliability and availability of 5 different types of crudes. Even during bad times, during the attacks on our facility in Opec and Kharis, as Alex mentioned, we lost almost 60%. We satisfy the needs and demand of all the customers with no interruption whatsoever during that time.
So in your view, how prepared is Europe for the embargoes?
Well, as I said, for crude oil, it's a fungible commodity. It will be shifting from one location to other as more supply go to Asia. Some of the supply that's going to Asia will be shifted to Europe. I think the issue, for Europe is is gas and LNG, because there is no spare capacity available. These are all in long-term contracts. As you drop supply coming from Russia, no one else really can step up and meet the additional demand. So it is going to be a major issue for Europe when it comes to gas and LNG. For crude oil, these are markets, and with the right price, crude will be shifting from one location to the other.
I know that the Jafurah field is one of the priorities for Aramco in developing Jafurah for gas domestically, but let me ask you this. Is there a potential for Aramco to export gas?
We are going to export hydrogen, blue hydrogen. So our priority, we are expanding our gas by close to 60% over the next 8 years, which is significant growth in gas. And this is to satisfy local demand and eliminate liquid burning in the kingdom. We have close to 1 million barrels of liquid burning in the kingdom. It will improve the economics in terms of using gas. It will reduce the emissions, and it will also help Aramco because we receive power through the grid. In Scope 2, when you use more gas power plants, you will reduce your emissions. So we will be utilizing more gas in the kingdom. As we always work with the Ministry of Energy when it comes to additional supply available. As long as we satisfy the kingdom requirements, we can export. This is what happened in blue hydrogen. So some of the Jafurah gas will be going to blue hydrogen and will be exported to different markets. Similarly, LNG and others will be considered based on supply and the kingdom's need.
And are you finding markets for blue hydrogen at the moment? And when do you think this market is going to develop?
I think hydrogen is used mainly currently in refineries or for fertilizers. A little bit in other sectors like transport, power, and buildings, but it will be a growth market. I think the challenge for hydrogen is infrastructure and cost. And customers would like to have hydrogen, but not at any cost. That is the issue. So today, for the amounts that we are planning to export, we are identifying customers, but mainly in East Asia, Japan and Korea, South Korea, there are customers. And some of the Europeans and some customers are looking for the prices to go down. And for the prices of hydrogen to go down, you need to scale up. So when you scale up, technologies will be developed and efficiencies and all of that, you will be able to reduce cost. But if you are going to develop it now, you need an offtake agreement for at least 15 to 20 years in order to develop all of this blue hydrogen. So yes, customers are looking for it, but not at any cost.
I'm glad that Alex mentioned the Opec meeting, which is happening very soon. I'm not going to talk about that, but I'll ask you about prices. And I want you to explain to us, why is the market behaving the way it is? Why is there pressure on prices when we're seeing a very, very, very tightness around supply and also around the spare capacity? There isn't much spare capacity left, as many officials in the Gulf keep reminding us. So why are we seeing this impact on prices?
I think the market is focusing on short-term economics rather than supply fundamentals. The sentiment, because of higher inflation, what central banks are doing in terms of increasing interest rate to control inflation, and the sentiment that we are seeing in the market about looming recessions and what would that do to demand. So they are focusing on what could happen to demand if a recession happened in different parts of the world and what would that do. They are not focusing, as you mentioned, on supply fundamentals. Today, inventories are extremely low. Spare capacity is also extremely low. And if China open up a little bit, you will find out that spare capacity will be eroded completely. If aviation industries, by the way, compared to pre-COVID level, we are still 1.7 million barrels in jet fuel, lower than pre-COVID. And the spare capacity that we have currently is like almost 1.5% of total supply, talking about 100 million. So even if the aviation industry pick up, you will erode that spare capacity. And when you erode that spare capacity, the world should be worried. Because there is not going to be any buffer for any hiccup, any interruption, any unforeseen events anywhere in the world. Today, what's happening in gas is the same. LNG, everything available is in long-term contracts, going to certain markets. There is no available capacity to meet any interruptions in the system. This is where we are heading. Because even if we decide today that we are going to increase our investment and do something, it's going to be difficult because that takes a number of years. So if China open up, economies start improving, or if the aviation industry, as I said, start asking for more jet fuel, you will erode this spare capacity completely.
Which leads well into my next question about underinvestment. This is a topic, Mr. Nasser, that you've stressed a lot over the past months, that there is an underinvestment in the upstream sector. When do you believe that there's going to be a return of investment into the sector?
Well, unfortunately, the underinvestment is still going on. You know, it's the pressure the companies are seeing from regulators, policymakers, shareholders, about no need for investment, and it's putting a lot of pressure on these companies to really put long-term investment in the upstream. I'll give an example. For example, we decided to go to 13 million barrels capacity in 2020. It's going to come in 2027. So this is an investment. You need to do the engineering. It's going to take you 2 to 3 years. After engineering, you start construction. These things take time. So you're talking about 6 to 7 years from the time you take the decision for that additional barrels to come to the market. Unfortunately, because of all the pressure that we are seeing on companies from different policymakers and regulators and the sentiment that is there in the market, we see only short cycle projects coming on with quick profits, but not long-term projects that will sustain a plateau for a longer period of time. The increments we are talking about is going to sustain the plateau for 20 and 30 years. So you need to believe in the long term and the need for additional supply to put that type of an investment, but we don't see it right now.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your plans to build capacity to 13 million? Where are you exactly in the process? Is everything on time? So if you can just walk us through where this additional production will come from as well.
The additional capacity is coming mainly from offshore. Number of increments that we are bringing on stream. We're bringing Marjan, we're bringing Berri, Zuluf, Heavy, and also Safaniya. Marjan and Berri is currently under construction. Zuluf contracts were awarded, and Safaniya is under FEED. But the progress is going very well. We are on target to meet our plan to add 1 million barrels, go from 12 million to 13 million barrels of capacity. And we do have the right experience in terms of constructing giga projects, and we have the best quality reservoirs. And this coming from stacked reservoirs. You know, when you talk about these are fields well known to everybody in the industry, but you know, they have stacked reservoirs, and we are developing some of these stacked reservoirs.
Given the tightness in spare capacity, I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times. We all know that Aramco has a capacity of 12 million barrels a day. How fast could Aramco reach the 12 million barrels a day, and how long could you sustain it for?
You know, based on our MSC, maximum sustained capacity policy, it's 90 days to bring that capacity. But in 2020, we were asked by the Ministry of Energy or the government, because as per our concession agreement targets every month, and the maximum sustained capacity is under the government, we were asked to bring it. We brought it in 30 days. So we went, at that time, we were producing around 9 something. And we brought it within 30 days. So, but the policy and the guideline is 90 days. But I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. We should be really concerned if we reach that level. Because it means you are running the world with no spare capacity. Any interruptions anywhere in the world, you will have volatility and prices will escalate so fast. This is what's happening today with gas and LNG. There is no spare capacity and you cannot meet the demand. The minute we reach that stage, we should be decent.
Are we close to that stage, or is it the policy of the kingdom to always sit on 1 million barrels a day of spare capacity?
You know, if you look at the OPEC numbers, the production numbers are very clear. What we are producing, the target comes, as I said, from the Ministry of Energy, from the government every month. The maximum sustained capacity is what we have today, is 12 million. Until we reach the 30 million, it's going to take a couple of years. So that is the plan. However, as I said, our expectation is demand will pick up. And you know, the contribution should not only come from Saudi Aramco, the contribution should be coming from everybody, you know, in the world that are in this industry. You know, additional capacity should not be the responsibility of Aramco only.
Let's move to the demand side. The IEA says that demand could be between 100 to 24 million by 2050. Where does Aramco see it?
You know, the IEA also under their zero emission scenario by 2050 talked about 70 million by 2030. The IEA also said next year we need 102. So imagine 23 to 30, we need to reduce more than 30 million barrels of demand. So that type of, you know, rhetorics, and it's really putting pressure on investors and policymakers because they see this is coming from experts in the business, and they take that seriously in terms of why would you do an investment if you think by 2030 it's going to be 70 million barrels and you have 100 million barrels today of supply. So these scenarios is talking. For us, what we believe is that demand will continue to grow to 2030 and beyond. And that's where we made the decision, as I said, in 2020 with a lot of spare capacity at that time to expand our MSC to 13 million. If you think about it today, alternatives, solar, wind, only contribute 2% to the primary energy, 2%. 10% in power, electric power. Electric cars, 2% of the total global fleet. So alternatives are not ready yet to shoulder a bigger portion of the energy requirements. Until they are ready, we need to work in parallel. We need to develop our oil and gas and make sure that we decarbonize our resources further by building carbon capture and sequestration, other means to decarbonize, more efficiency. Also, we are involved in building our renewable blue hydrogens, other means of alternatives to eliminate any emissions. We are for climate protection, but we need to work in parallel. And until Plan B is ready, which is the alternatives, the renewable, we need to continue to invest in Plan A to make sure we don't end up with shortage of supply. Look at what's happening globally today. 8 billion tons of coal. This is the highest in a decade. So if you think about it, we are transitioning to coal. Think about it.
Or wood.
Well, these are the signals, you know. Affordability and availability is key. Affordability and availability is key. And you cannot prevent these countries because their priority as leaders in different parts of the world, because they, as I say, transition will need to happen orderly. Transition, maturity, and the speed of transition will be different for different parts of the world depending on their economic maturity. Their priority is different. Their priority is to put food on the table for their citizens. And if it requires coal because it is less expensive for them, this is what they are doing. They are building more coal power plants. And So if you think about it, yes, in certain part of the West, yes, there is reductions because more renewable, but in other part of the world, there is twice as much more emissions coming out. It's one atmosphere. We need to all work together. So affordability and availability is a must. So that we need to invest to ensure gas, crude, decarbonized is available. At the same time, we need to build renewable. And as I say, when renewable is ready, you can phase out crude and gas and whatever you're talking about in terms of emission, but make sure it is ready first. And this is where I keep saying we have a flawed transition plan. It's
Mr.
not
Nasser,
really
sorry for
helping.
interrupting, but you've mentioned renewables, and this is something that Aramco is working on, and you do have a net zero target by 2050. What progress are you making towards reaching that net zero target?
Well, we're progressing very well. We issued our sustainability report this year. In that sustainability report, we put the roadmap to achieve a net zero for scope 1 and 2 by 2050. We had an interim target of reducing 52 million tons by 2035 compared to a normal business, compared also to a baseline in 2018. And we'll be doing that by efficiency improvement in our existing facilities, by shifting the power sector to gas. We'll reduce scope 2 emissions coming to the company by carbon. The biggest element is carbon capture and sequestration, because we will be building the biggest in the world in terms of carbon capture and sequestration. And of course, we will be building our low carbon or no carbon energy in terms of renewables, blue hydrogens. And at the same time, we're working in a lot of technologies that will also help us in addition to nature-based solutions. We're talking about 300 million mangrove in kingdom and out of kingdom. And at the same time, we're working on deployment of circular carbon economy and creation of these circular carbon economies techniques and direct air capture, more engine efficiencies and mobile CO2 capture. There's a lot of things that are part of our strategy to achieve our net zero in scope 1 and 2 by 2050. But it is progressing very well. We're making progress, and it's going as planned.
Sir Nasser, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but just when you were talking about the transition, usually what we see in the mass media are the extreme voices from both ends of the argument, and it ends up being a kind of shouting match. And there is no progress being made when you have this shouting match. What is the argument that oil companies could give to civil societies and governments that they could really be part of the solution?
You know, as I said, we are for climate protection, and we are an integral part of the solution, the energy industry as a whole. And we need to work together. And we strongly believe in orderly transition. And as I said, we need to work in parallel. While building renewables, we need to ensure that we have enough supplies of oil and gas with much less emissions than it is today, going on. The energy industry have the experience, they have the capabilities, the subject matter expert, the giga and mega projects capabilities available for them to do all of these projects in hydrogen, green, blue, renewables, and all of these things. So we need to have a better dialogue. Unfortunately, there is no constructive dialogue currently going on, even though, as I said, you've seen some of these scenarios talking about 70 million in 2030. So why would you do an investment to start with if you are thinking in 2030 you will be 70 million barrels? We need to have a much better dialogue, because this is only going to work if we put our heads together and find a solution to what's going on. And otherwise, you will see more utilization of coal going on, and because people need energy at the end of the day. So I think the energy industry as a whole has the experience and capabilities available for creating the right transition that we're all aiming for.
Great. I think we're ready to take a few questions from the audience. So if you have a question, here.
Thank you, Amina. Your Excellency, can you talk a bit about the dollar and cost inflation and the potential for a cap on Russian oil prices? Three big things there.
As I said, the inflation is really this type of sentiments creating on the markets, and it's focusing mainly on demand, it's impacting demand and not what's happening on supply fundamentals. And it's really not reading the situation as it should be, which is low inventory, very spare capacity that's completely being eroded. So this type of inflation, until it is controlled completely, which will require raising more interest rates and all of that, and it will have an impact. In addition, inflation is impacting also some of the investment that we are seeing. Commodity prices increased 50 to 80%. So project that used to cost this much now is costing much more. So you need more investment. We talked about $700 billion in 2014, and now we are talking about $300 to $400 billion. You need much more than what you used to spend in 2014 because of inflation and commodity price going up. Now, it will all depend on capping Russian. It all depends on what the Russian will do. If they decide to do what they have been saying is that they will limit their supply, that will have an impact on the market, as I said. So capping Russian barrels will all depend on what the Russians will do and whether that's going to happen. This is, the Russian will answer that.
And the final one is just how global currencies and the dollar strength is affecting you and the industry.
Well, we are big to the dollar. For us, as in Saudi Aramco, as I said, we are seeing increase in commodity prices globally, which impact the cost of projects. But for us, if we look at it in the cost per barrel, we look at it in the cost per million BTU for what we are bringing to the market, it's still within our targets.
Okay, I think we have one question in the back.
Sayyid Amin, Rafiq Latta from Energy Intelligence. I'd like to ask, thank you very much for this, I'd like to ask a bit about your costs of production, how these new projects compare with your current costs, with some numbers if possible, and also, so, if possible, some capex, as much detail as you're happy to give, by project. Thank you.
We are developing offshore fields. When you develop offshore compared to onshore, it's a little bit higher cost. But these are fields that we are producing. They are the highest quality reservoirs. So the cost is very reasonable considering our experience in development and our experience also in constructing projects. We gave capital guidance. You asked about capital for this year. It was $40 to $50 billion. And, usually upstream is almost 50% of that. We expect our capital to go up until 2025, through 2025, because we are, as I said, we are adding 1 million barrels. We are increasing the gas by 60% over the next 8 years. We are shifting up to 4 million barrels of liquid to chemical. We are building a lot of carbon capture and sequestration project. The blue hydrogen, there is a lot of projects that we are currently taking. They are either in engineering or in construction, by the way. So these are not plans or whatever. These are things that are being actioned on.
How about the appetite for acquisitions, Mr. Nasser? Are you looking at downstream assets, acquisitions in Asia, expanding your downstream in general?
We made a big acquisition with SABIC, as you know, 2020, because of the shifting of liquid to chemical, and we wanted somebody with a lot of experience in chemical, and SABIC is one of the best when it comes to chemical. So that was a big acquisition for us. We took 70% of stake in SABIC. We made a deal that is going through the antitrust right now, or the regulatory process with Valvoline, because we wanted to expand our lubes business. Hopefully it will close in the first half of next year. We are looking at a lot of JVs, let me put it that way, in downstream because of the liquid to chemical. Some of the liquid to chemical 4 million will happen in the kingdom, but also a lot will happen out of kingdom, mainly in Asia, because there is a high growth there. A lot of the new refineries that are coming, the integration into petrochemical is more than 50%. So it is the right business for us to invest on. And we are making a huge investment in the kingdom in the liquid to chemical and the hydrogen and other things. But major acquisitions depends on the opportunities. We made a deal. It's also going through a regulatory process with BKN to place 400,000 barrels in Poland. This was recently. We took 30% of a refinery and 100% of a wholesale in Gdansk. That should also close end of this year or early next year.
Could you expand that, Mr. Nasser? Could you further expand your acquisition or your...
Of course, you know, any assets that we own alone as Aramco or with our partners, we're looking at more integration into petrochemical. So if it is an asset with an integration of 5 or 10% in petrochemical, we are always looking at how can we integrate it further, because we are not going to meet our 4 million, up to 4 million barrels of liquid to chemical target unless we look at our existing assets and then and integrate more, and then look at other assets that we can go as a JV if it is outside the kingdom, or build our own in the kingdom.
I can sit here for hours asking you questions, but unfortunately we ran out of time. I want to thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us. But before we wrap up, I would like to ask the CEO of Shell, Mr. Ben van Beurden, to join us on stage. Thank you so much.